All right, so when we think about cybersecurity, it's easy to picture that classic image, right? The lone genius in a dark room, furiously typing away, battling digital bad guys all by themselves. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain on what might be the most powerful weapon in the entire arsenal: working together. We're going to dive into how collaboration is the real key to a rock-solid defense.
So let me ask you this. What's the greatest tool for a cyber expert? I mean, we're all conditioned to think it's the keyboard, right? That's the gateway to all the code, all the systems, all that technical magic. But is that really the whole story?
Because the truth is, modern cybersecurity is just way too big, way too complex for any one person to handle. The real force multiplier isn't a piece of hardware, it's the human network. It's the team, the shared brainpower, the different skill sets, and that sense of shared responsibility. That's the ultimate tool. So here's our game plan. First, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the teamwork dynamic itself. Then we'll zoom in on the essential soft skills that you personally need to bring to the table. After that, we'll pan out and see how this all plays out across a whole organization before we really focus in on the power of the written word and how to make sure your reports and emails actually make a difference. Okay, let's start at the very heart of it all, the teamwork dynamic. This is all about the chemistry of your immediate team. You know, the people you're in the trenches with day in and day out. This group is your first and, honestly, your most important line of defense.
So what do we even mean by team dynamics? Well, simply put, it's the invisible force that makes a team either click or, well, not click. It's that mix of personalities, how you all talk to each other, and how you work together. And this isn't some fuzzy feel-good concept. Good team dynamics lead to incredible results. In fact, Google did this massive study called Project Aristotle, and they found the #1 factor for a high-performing team was something called psychological safety, which is a huge part of great dynamics. On the flip side, poor dynamics, they just create chaos and can totally sink a project.
And you'll see these dynamics show up differently depending on the situation. Think about a formal team, like an incident response crew during a crisis. You've got clear roles, a tight deadline, the relationships are professional, and it's all about efficiency. That's fantastic for getting a job done fast, but it can be a little rigid. Now compare that to an informal setting, maybe a brainstorming session on new threats. Here, personalities are a much bigger deal. It's messier, less structured, but that's where you get some really creative, innovative ideas. The trick is knowing which environment you need for the task in front of you.
And of course, there's always that tension between working as a team and just going solo. Teamwork is amazing for big, complex problems. You can share the load, bounce ideas off each other, and you get to learn from people who know things you don't. But let's be real, sometimes working alone is just better. You get fewer distractions, you don't have to deal with personality clashes, and you have total control. You can be incredibly efficient. The best pros are the ones who know when it's time to collaborate and when it's time to put on the headphones and just get it done.
So how do you make a team more than just a collection of people? You have to play to everyone's strengths. And this is a real strategy. You need to have honest conversations about what each person is great at. Then you plan your projects around that. Let the person who's a genius at reverse engineering malware do that, while the fantastic communicator handles the updates for management. Pair up a senior analyst with a junior one so they can learn from each other. And this is why reviewing your work is so crucial. When you analyze how a project went, you see who shined where. It creates this feedback loop that helps you get smarter about assigning tasks next time. That regular review is what makes a team truly effective over the long haul.
But, it's not always smooth sailing. What happens when people disagree? Conflict is going to happen. It's just a fact when you have smart, passionate people working together. The real test of a team is how they handle it. Ignoring it is the worst thing you can do. Step 1 is you just have to acknowledge it's there. Then step 2, you talk about how it's affecting the project, not about who's right or wrong, but about the impact on the team's goals. From there, you can get everyone to agree to cooperate on finding a fix. And that brings us to the most important step: communicate. And I mean really communicate, using active listening, making sure every single person feels like they've actually been heard.
Okay, so we've looked at the team. Now let's zoom in on you. Because a great team structure is awesome, but every single person has to show up with the right toolkit. And I'm not talking about software here. I'm talking about your soft skills. There are a ton of interpersonal skills we could talk about, but let's just zero in on 3 that are completely non-negotiable in our field: active listening, collaboration, and clear communication. And seriously, don't think of these as nice-to-haves. In today's world, they are core competencies, just as important as knowing your way around a network. Let's start with active listening. This is so much more than just not talking.
It's about understanding the why behind what someone is saying. So imagine a user tells you they clicked a phishing link. A passive listener just hears user error, but an active listener sees a puzzle to solve. You ask questions, you listen, and you start to understand their workflow, the pressures they're under. You figure out why that fake email was so convincing. That kind of empathy lets you build better security that actually works for people. You build trust instead of just assigning blame. All right, next up, collaboration in the heat of the moment. Picture this. Ransomware is spreading across the network. Files are getting encrypted in real time. You've got the network team, the forensics expert, legal, communications. There is no way one person can handle all of that. It's impossible. Success or failure in that moment comes down to how well everyone collaborates under extreme pressure. It's about knowing your piece of the puzzle, trusting your teammates to handle theirs, and keeping the lines of communication wide open. And that leads right into our third skill, clear communication. Look, you can be the most brilliant technical mind in the world, but if you can't explain what you're doing to a non-technical person, it's almost useless. You're constantly going to be talking to managers, to people in finance, to legal. Trying to explain why a new security policy is vital requires you to drop the jargon. Think of jargon as a barrier. Clear, simple language is the tool that gets everyone on the same page and helps keep the whole organization safe. And that idea of clear communication is actually the perfect bridge to our next topic. Because real security isn't something that just happens in the server room. For it to actually work, it has to be a team effort that includes the entire organization. Every single person has a part to play. This right here is the fundamental principle of a modern security strategy. You can spend millions on the best firewalls, the most advanced software, but all it takes is one person making one small mistake and the whole thing comes crashing down. Security is a team sport, and the whole company is on the team. And this is exactly why collaborating across departments is so critical. Our biggest weaknesses are almost always human. Think about it. You need to work with HR to build security training into the onboarding for new hires. You work with the finance team to help them spot weird transactions that could signal a breach. You partner with legal to make sure your incident response plan is compliant. Every department is an ally. Your job is to go out there and build those alliances. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about verbal communication, but now let's focus on the written word. Because in cybersecurity, what you write down in a report or a policy can be just as powerful as any tool you deploy. These documents are the official record, they're the call to action, and they're the playbook for the whole organization. So let's break down 3 of the big ones. First, a vulnerability report. The audience here is senior management. They don't need every technical detail. They need to understand the business risk and what you recommend they do about it. Then you have a penetration test report. This is for your fellow techies, IT managers, other security pros. Here, you do go into the weeds with detailed findings and data. Finally, the incident report. This is for your internal security team, and it's often a legal document. It has to be incredibly precise. Timestamps. What happened? Who did what? What was the impact? The main takeaway? You have to know your audience. Okay, so knowing what to write is one thing, but how you write it is what separates a report that gets filed away from one that actually gets results. So let's quickly go over the elements that make your writing powerful and professional. Think of this as your pre-flight checklist for any document. First, have a clear purpose. What do you want the reader to do after they read this? Second, be accurate. Double and triple check your facts because these reports can have very real legal consequences. Third, attention to detail. That means proofreading everything, even down to who's on the to line of the email. Fourth, use the right tone. You want to be confident, but not arrogant, and you need to adapt your tone for your audience. And finally, use a clear layout. Nobody wants to read a giant wall of text. Use headings, use bullet points, make it easy for people to read. And if you ever start to think that those tiny details don't matter, get this. There's a true story about a company that had to pay out $5 million in overtime, all because of a single misplaced comma in a legal document. $5 million for a comma. In our world, a small mistake in a report could have consequences just as big, if not bigger. Attention to detail isn't just a good idea, it's a fundamental part of the job. So, to wrap all of this up, let's bring it back to that central idea. We spend so much of our time and energy focusing on the technology, the firewalls, the encryption, all of it. And that stuff is critical, don't get me wrong. The technology is the lock on the door, but it's the people, their awareness, their collaboration, their communication. They're the ones who hold the key.
The threats will evolve, the technology is always going to change, but the core principles of great teamwork and clear communication, those are timeless. So the real question I want to leave you with is this. What's one thing you can do, starting right now, to help unlock the human potential on your team and in your organization?